All right, welcome back to another episode of the Believer Breakdown. My name is Sadiq, and we're going to pick back up with where we left off with this discussion, this breakdown, this look at concept of lust. And so for a few episodes, we talked about what lust was and what it meant and the things that we lust after, and we're going to continue. So we had on this big screen, and we kind of broke it down like it was Family Feud, and if we had some top answers, we would put it on the board. And the first thing that we said we lust after is people. We're just honest. People lust after other people. There's a craving, there's a desire for other people. And we even looked at it in the scripture. So that was the first episode. And then the second episode broke down how we lust after possessions. We talked a little bit about Judas and how Judas wanted 30 pieces of silver. He got himself 30 pieces of silver to turn over Jesus. And there were other examples as well in the book of Joshua, but we lust after possessions. And the third thing on this big board was power. And we looked at that from Acts chapter 8, and we said, one of the things that we focus on, that we crave after, is power. We want to call the shots. And we talked a little bit about if we had a specific power, if we had, if we were like a superhero and what that power would be. And so some of the times we actually focus on desiring and having, possessing power. And so on this board, we have, three things so far: people, possessions, and power. And now we're going to take a look at the fourth thing today. And that fourth big thing that I think we lust after, and I gave you some time to just think through it as I was doing a review, but I think the fourth thing that we lust after, again, I'm going to come at you with the scriptures. And so in Matthew chapter 20, verses 20 through 28, this is what the Bible says. Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to him with her sons, kneeling down and asking something from him. And he said to her, "What do you wish?" And she said to him, "Grant that these two sons of mine may sit, one on your right hand and the other on the left, in your kingdom." But Jesus answered and said, "You do not know what you ask. Are you able to drink the cup that I am about to drink and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with?" And they said to him, "We are able." And so he said to them, "You will indeed drink my cup and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with, but to sit on my right hand and on my left is not mine to give, but it is for those for whom it is prepared by my Father." And when the 10 heard it, they were greatly displeased with the two brothers. But Jesus called them to himself and said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who are great exercise authority over them. Yet it shall not be so among you, but whoever desires to become great among you, let him be your servant. And whoever desires to be first among you, let him be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many." And going back to the 20th verse, the Bible said, "Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to him," talking about Jesus, "came to him with her sons, kneeling down and asking something from him. And he said to her, 'What do you wish?' She said to him, 'Grant that these two sons of mine may sit, one on your right hand and the other on the left, in your kingdom.'" And so this mother took her sons to Jesus, and they already had a close relationship, and Jesus wanted to know, okay, what is it that you're asking for? And she wanted her sons, one to be on the right hand, as the Bible said, and the other on the left in God's kingdom. Pretty much what this woman was craving, what she was lusting after, and likely her sons as well, since the disciples were upset with them or irritated with them, as the scripture says. It says that they were displeased. I think that fourth big thing that we lust after is prominence. I think we lust after fame. We lust after prestige. We lust after just desiring to be popular. I mean, this mother took some extra steps with her sons to come to Jesus and to say, look, I'm trying to have my sons in a high authority and a high position in your kingdom. Sometimes when it comes to lust, it's not so much about people, it's not so much about possessions or power at times. Sometimes we just want to be recognized as somebody that is important. I think you see that in some churches. That's why sometimes you go to churches and everybody has these titles, and some of these titles aren't even biblical, but sometimes people inside churches carry these titles because they want to be recognized as somebody that is important. You think about it, how often you go around, and whether it was earned in a specific field or whether it was honorary, how many people just attach to themselves or have attached to their names the word doctor? Some people won't even acknowledge you in a respectful manner unless you call them by this prestigious title. Sometimes we just lust after fame. We lust after recognition. And here's the thing, like sometimes this lust for prominence, this lust for recognition and fame and prestige and popularity, sometimes it happens in so many different ways. And so sometimes it's not even wrapped up in a way that we could see. Like sometimes this lust for prominence come from like a geographical standpoint. And this is what I mean. Sometimes if you're the owner of a business or a company that's doing well, sometimes it is important for that owner to have the tallest building in the city. I mean, it has to be, you know, in a specific area, and then once it's in that specific area, it has to also be the tallest building in the city. It has to be that huge skyscraper, and that top office has to be like that. The CEO, the leader of that company with the tallest building, their office, even if they're not even there, but their office has to be at the very top where it could look down on all the other buildings and on all the other people. Sometimes we just lust prominence. And maybe some of us don't have our own businesses that are thriving to that degree where, you know, we can even afford to have a building, let alone the tallest building in the city. But sometimes we just want the biggest house in our family. Sometimes we want the biggest house amongst our friends. Like we just lust this fame, this prestige. Sometimes we want the attention that just comes along with being where we are. You know, there's prestige that comes with the school that you went to. There's prestige that comes along with, you know, where you're living. Like sometimes people just want that recognition. I went to Harvard. I went to Yale. I went to Columbia. I went to this Ivy League. Well, I want to tell you that my school may not have, you know, where I went to undergrad may not have that type of prestige, but man, it was a great school. It was a great school, but sometimes people just lust after that prominence, you know, based on the history and based on the name that it carries. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people wearing some Ivy League shirt like an MIT and they haven't even gone there. Sometimes it's a dream, you know, sometimes it's a high school student, and I can understand that to a degree, but sometimes it's an adult that just in their head sort of wants the recognition that goes along with that. And sometimes geographically, there's this lust for prominence that comes along with not just not just us living in a specific place, but sometimes going even deeper to what is within that specific place. So this is what I mean. California, the cost of living is really expensive. It's a lot of homelessness in California. There's, the cost of living is extremely high, and it really doesn't matter what part of California. There's a lot of homelessness in Sacramento. Cost of living is high in comparison to a lot of parts of the country. Cost of living is pretty high in Oakland. I remember first time I went to Oakland, and I remember going to get a haircut before this meeting that I had. I went to the barber shop. I was like, "It's how much for a haircut?" No, back home it don't cost that much, but that comes along with the cost of living. And so even though there are parts of California that are really expensive and look nice, like a Oakland, like a San Francisco, a bunch of different cities that I've been to. San Diego is absolutely incredible. The weather is nice. But what gets that prominence is when people say, I'm from Beverly Hills, I'm from Los Altos or Saratoga. Like there's prominence with where we live, and sometimes we crave that. Sometimes we will do whatever it takes to put ourselves in those communities, even if we can't afford it. Sometimes we'll not only put ourselves in that community and say we can't afford it, but we will attach ourselves to people in those communities as if they are better than other people. Why? Because we lust prominence, and sometimes it presents itself where people are geographically. It's not enough to just live in Texas, and I've said on another episode dealing with something else, dealing with culture, but I've said like Texas is at times like its own country. I mean, it's really unique. Houston is different than Dallas, and San Antonio. The whole state is just unique by itself. And while Dallas is nice, it's not University Park. While DC is nice, people want to live in Northwest. And here's the thing, Northwest is nice, but it's a whole different level of different mindsets that come when you say I'm from upper Northwest. Like there's just lust that comes with this sort of prominence that's attached to us geographically. I mean, Maryland has a bunch of nice homes in it. And you can find nice homes in Baltimore. You can find nice homes in Upper Marlboro. You can find nice homes in Waldorf and La Plata. You can find nice homes in Annapolis. But then when somebody says that they are from Potomac, when they're from Chevy Chase or Bethesda, sometimes there's some lust that is just attached to that. And it's attached to that mindset of just being better than others, of being popular because of where I live. Lots of great homes in Virginia and in Arlington, but it's sometimes a different story when you say that I live in McLean. There's a lot of great homes in Boston, going going further north. If you've ever been to Massachusetts and Boston specifically, but it's not Lexington. And so sometimes there's lust that comes with just where we are, and it's not just where we are. Like this concept of us lusting for fame and lusting for prestige and popularity. I mean, sometimes it is socially. Sometimes it's not just geographically, because geographically, if you live in DC and you live in Northeast, Southeast, Southwest, Northwest, it doesn't even matter. But you could travel to Georgetown and hang out and people won't even know. So you can adjust geographically. And sometimes our lust for prominence is socially. Like we want the recognition for our work. If you've done some research, if you're an author, it's important for your name to be first or near the top of the list. Ask how many attorneys When they're working for a law firm or if they own a law firm, ask them how important it is socially for them to have their name closer to the beginning of the name of the law firm. We want to be the go-to person. We want to be the individuals that everyone is drawn to. We want that name recognition. There is lust in our prominence. People won't always know where we live. People won't always know how much we make. But man, if you're the person that everyone is drawn to, there's some lust in that. Like culturally, we want our culture to be on full display. I grew up in Philly, and the part of Philly that I grew up in, it was I mean, Philly was great when I was growing up. And I know that there were parts of the city that were just, it was separated by culture. Like different communities had its own cultures. If you lived in parts of South Philly, you might be in a predominantly black community, or you might be in a predominantly Italian community. But I grew up in North Philly, and the part of North Philly that I grew up in, it was interesting because there was this street, main highway called Roosevelt Boulevard, and around Roosevelt Boulevard and Ninth Street, it kind of separated two different cultures. You had on what we would say the west side of Roosevelt Boulevard, you had the black community, and on the right side, you had the Latino community. So whenever you cross the boulevard from black community, you would go into the Latino community, and very often you would see the Puerto Rican flag. You would see Puerto Rican flag inside people's vehicles. You would see it, hanging out on people's porches. And I share that because sometimes we get really excited when we see our culture. And then you keep on going, and then the music gets going, and it's like, okay. There's clearly some cultural pride that's taking place there. And so I'm not saying that embracing culture is a bad thing, but I'm saying from a state of lust for prominence and prestige and fame and popularity, from those things, it can mess us up when our lust has us thinking that our lifestyle, where we live, what our culture is, the things that we enjoy, where we are from, when we think that those are better than or greater than, or when we have that strong craving for it over anything else, sometimes it's because of the lust that we have inside of us. Now, again, for the record, I think what I saw growing up was cultural appreciation, cultural pride. I never got the sense that the Latinos on that side of the boulevard in Philly, I never got a sense that they felt like they were better than anybody else. But I am saying that sometimes there is lust for prominence that turns cultural appreciation into assumptions of it being dominant. Like sometimes I think people assume, again, this lust for prominence, people just assume that their culture is better than others. And so we lust for our own cultures to be seen as better than others. I think that was a big factor in how World War II got started, quite frankly. And so this lust for prominence sometimes links into lust for power. Sometimes it links into lust for possession. Sometimes it links into, lust for people. But this lust for prominence specifically always has the individual wanting to be recognized, wanting to be seen as the best and the greatest. And so here's how we deal with it. We deal with lust for prominence. We deal with this lust for fame. We deal with this lust for, wanting to be the one that sits on the right hand and the left hand in God's kingdom. Whereas Jesus is saying, The person that has the desire to be first among you, let him be your slave, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. So this is what we could do. We could first recognize that prominence is a thing and recognize the cravings for it. So don't just try to be popular. Don't try to sit on the right hand and the left hand of God. Just be who God called you to be. But you got to recognize those cravings. You got to recognize when you're being stimulated because you believe that you're better than somebody else, or that this area is better than another area, that this home, this job, this job that somebody has is better to have than what God has blessed you with. I'd rather be an athlete because they're on the stage doing their thing all the time, as opposed to being a teacher that nobody knows. And I would argue that teachers that nobody know often had the greatest impact in society. And so recognize those cravings. And then secondly, I would say, remember that God is our strength. Like when those lust cravings are so strong that you see yourself, your culture, your area, your community, that geographical aspect, when that fame is so strong, only God is going to be able to help you with that. And so you need God to help uproot the problem. Jesus said, look, this lust, and it's not called lust here, it's called these desires, but he says, and whoever desires to be first among you, let him be your slave, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. So sometimes you got to uproot that problem and let God flip it on his head. Sometimes you have to let God flip the equation. Sometimes you have to remember that your culture is special, but it's not more special than anyone else's. So you got to get rid of wanting to be Mr. Popular, Mrs. Popular, being, the top woman or the head woman. Sometimes you just have to keep your attention on God. The son of Zebedee's mom looked like her attention was on a recognition, but we got to keep our attention on God. Then the next thing we have to do is we got to flee from it. If people are telling you that, oh man, you're the man, it could stimulate that lust. It can increase that lust for prominence. And so you might have to run from people that give you a big head. You might have to run from people that think that you're perfect. Then you got to be committed to not chasing after prominence. You got to be committed to not chase after fame and prestige. Like you got to remember that the Bible teaches us that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. Like everything in it belongs to God. So chasing after prominence is putting attention on yourself instead of putting attention on God. And that's why it goes right back to what Jesus was saying. He said, man, whoever desires to be first among you, let him be your slave. Take that attention off of you. Go serve. And then the last thing, which I absolutely love, is we got to be like Christ. We got to think like Christ. We got to understand that the first shall be last and that the last shall be first. The Bible said in Matthew 20, verse 28, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. Jesus didn't come for the prominence. Jesus didn't come to be set up as king on the throne. Like that was going to happen. But that's not why he came. He came to die. He came to give his life as a ransom. so that we could have eternal life. Like, that's why he came. He didn't come to get all the accolades. He came to suffer on our behalf. And so we could be like Christ, and we can go ahead and turn down that ongoing attention. And this is not to say that there's anything wrong with being recognized. It's not to say that there's anything wrong with people blessing you and acknowledging the things that you've done, the contributions that you've made. But it is to say that when you crave after it, when you are motivated by the attention, then lust is taking hold of you for prominence. And so we got to be careful with that. So again, looking at our board, that number one thing that people lust after, other people. That second thing that people lust after are those possessions. The third thing that people lust after is power. And I believe that the fourth thing that people strongly crave after as it relates to lust is the prominence. Is that popularity, is that fame. So thanks for hanging out with us today. I hope you got something from this episode. Just do your best when it comes to lust. Turn it over to God. Be more like Christ, and you will get through it. Remember, the Bible says in Philippians chapter 4, verse 13, that I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. So don't think that you could do it by yourself, especially on this topic of lust. You cannot. But you got to turn it over to God. Let him give you the strength to get through it. Thanks for hanging out with us. We'll catch you next time on an episode of Believer Breakdown. My name's Sadiq.